Hi, Phyllis. How are you?
Hello, I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm sure you've been asked this question a lot today. That this movie in particular seems incredibly timely given everything that is happening in the upcoming election. And so I wanted to know for you as a director, when you were preparing for this movie, I don't know where exactly the world was at the point of you starting to film this, but how did everything going on and where we currently are kind of feed into the story that you were telling?
Um, well, it didn't when we shot Call Jane, the Dobbs case had already been heard or was just about to be heard, and the makeup of the court had changed. Um, and so we knew that something would be happening. Um, and probably something not so good for women's rights. But in the actual event, it was much worse than, we had anticipated. Row gone in one fell swoop instead of little bit at a time. And and so that was something that was shocking, but not unexpected. The truth is, I would have made this movie anyway, because the historically our rights have been chipped away, and that reproductive rights in particular have been under threat since the moment Roe was the law of the land in 1973,
Yeah, and I
sadly.
think, yeah. And I think this movie in particular, with historical films, we kind of sometimes hit that wall of like, why, yes, we're learning something that is history and it can become stale, but this was not that way. And this movie is very much telling a story that is still a fight in society as a whole. And so, how did you kind of like not combat that challenge of like this is a period piece, but it is still timely, even though it is not set in 2022?
Yeah. Well, I think what keeps it from becoming some sort of, dusty museum piece is it's a couple of things. It's the vitality of the moment, the actors, the characters that they play. A lot of those movies that may feel like history lessons to you, I think they probably are unduly expositional. The characters are not real flesh and blood characters. This is a very hard thing to avoid. But luckily, our script presents us with real people, and the actors absolutely knew how to embody that. Also, the choices we made in the film and the making of the film, not sentimentalizing or fetishizing the 60s, but presenting a real palette of how these people might have lived and looked and sounded in those days, um, along with shooting on Super 16, keeps it very connected to the here and now in a way that I think, using pop art colors and possibly shooting digitally would have just distanced the audience that much.
And the film also has the relationships within the film are kind of what drives it because while it is, yes, about the rights of humans and fighting for them, it takes one woman having to be in the thick of it to understand that it's not just her fight, it's a fight for everybody. And so with COVID, it's obviously different, kind of directing a cast and letting them get close to each other and actually feel those bonds. And so, what was that kind of like on set, especially with the
Yeah.
women that we get to see at Call Jane?
That was very difficult because it was right in the middle of it all, and we were wearing masks and goggles and face shields and all of that. But luckily, um, we were tested all the time, and so that by the time we got to set, anyone on set was very well taken care of in that way. um, we just had to trust each other, a lot like the James. Had to
Yeah.
trust each other. No one was going to rat each other out. We had to trust that people were being responsible, and off came the actors' masks, and my God, it was liberating. So in a way, having those masks helped the whole Jane vibe in a funny way, because we shot immediately. Masks came off and action. and there they go, being free.
Well, yeah, and you have such a I mean, obviously you have Sigourney Weaver and Elizabeth Banks, but also just the cast in general is stacked, as they say. And so what hand did you have in like the preparation for this film and like picking who you wanted to embody
Yeah.
this story?
Oh, I cast every single role right down to the littlest one-liner. Um, Elizabeth was attached to the project when I came, but that seemed like very, very good casting to me. So I said yes. And I'd known her for about a decade. So with her, the luxury of being able to help gently shape something to suit the gifts of the lead was wonderful. We should always have that, and we don't often. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think this movie falls in line with a lot of your projects in not only centering women, but having a lot of women bring the stories to life as a whole. And for you as a director, is that something that is very important in the work that you put out into this world? Because there are more and more women directors, but it's not enough to kind of combat Hollywood. And so how is that approach for you? Like, do you make sure to tell these stories that might not have been told otherwise?
yeah. I think it's just always what I've done, even in my theater work. Um, I don't even think about it, but yes, everything is based around strong, difficult, contradictory women in one way or another. And probably the most successful thing I've ever written for the theater was the one play I've written, which centers around a man. I mean, it's a sobering,
Mhm.
jolt. But it was purposeful, like, here, let's see what happens. And I can't, having had that experience informs what I do now, which is to say, nope, I'm just going to keep going, do what I do.
Yeah, and it's important to have directors and writers who do that because otherwise, especially in theater, someone could fall so easily back into, okay, well, that's what worked, and just go with that instead of sticking
Yeah.
to your guns.
Yeah.
Um, I like to ask this at the end, especially with a movie that is so it's coming out at such an important time for not only this country, but like people all over. What do you hope audiences take away when they get to see Call Jane, and especially with everything kind of going on in the world?
Well, I hope that people feel not as if they've learned something, it's not a lesson, but that in some small way, it shifts a perspective here and there. It allows people to say, in a way in which they're not feeling judged, I never thought of this in this way. Um, that makes more sense to me now. You know, a whole rational reason discussion can happen. And when that happens, people can become empathetic, which is the thing that I want most of all. Have some empathy for someone who isn't you, no matter who you are and where you are. I think the film allows that.
Yeah, definitely. And I can't wait for everyone to get to see it. And thank you so much for talking with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
You as well.